Hello y'all and welcome back. Today is a video that I always look forward to filming, and we're going to be sharing my top favorite palettes out of all the palettes that I tried in the year 2022. Now if you missed it, halfway through the year I ranked all of the palettes I tried up until that point, so June, July-ish. I did the first 6 months, and then I've also just recently did the last 6 months, so if you missed those videos I'll leave them linked down in the description box, but that's where I just take all the palettes. I think it was about 25 for each video, and I ranked them just for that section of the year. And then now to sit down and do this video, I've kind of ranked them all in my head and picked out the top 20 of my favorite palettes from the entire year, kind of combining all the palettes together, thinking about the quality, the type of looks that I was able to get, the memories I have, like looking back, what palette stands out as just really fun memories working with it and the looks that I created, that sort of thing. And I have compiled my list of top 20 palettes. Now I do these that sounded weird. I do these type of videos in the same way that Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner does them, so I'll be sure to leave her link down below. But basically she shares her top 20 or 15, and then once she gets to the palette 6, she stops and does a look with each of those palettes until she works her way up to the top #1 palette from the year. So that is what we're going to be doing in today's video. I have my top 20 all the way to top 6 palette to share with you, and then hopefully tomorrow, but the next video you see, I'll be creating a look with my top 5, and then the next video you see will be my top 4, top 3, top 2, until finally the #1 palette from the year I will reveal in a video, and we'll be able to create a look with it one last time. I think this is my 3rd year doing it. So anyway, with that intro out of the way, I have my top 20. Let's dive in and I'll share with you guys why these palettes, out of all the 50+ palettes that I tried from the year, why these palettes stand out the most to me as just being really, really awesome. Okay, coming in at number 20 now. I am going to have a number on here just because you guys know me and remembering. I don't have the best memory, but I do know the first one I'm going to talk about is number 20, but I'll have a number up here somewhere to keep track. But for the 20th palette out of the whole year, I'm giving it to the Odens Eye Solomane 2 palette. This palette, not only is it beautiful and the color story just so stunning on the cover, I love how they brought it to life in the inside with the colors that they chose. It really kept to the theme of the palette. It kept to what I saw on the outside. It was very inspiring when it came to mixing and matching these blues and purples and oranges. I had so much fun with this palette. It is a stunning palette, and definitely a palette that, even though I think I created 4 or 5 looks, I can't remember exactly how many, maybe 6. I went back to this often, especially for just a quick look. I just felt like I could, stick with one color, like all blues, all purples, all oranges, and get a really solid color, or I could play around with it and create even more colors. And this is definitely a palette that, looking back, I wish I could create more looks just looking at it, because there's so many possibilities when you're kind of jumping around on this palette, like combining the orange and purple together, or the orange and blue, or the blue and purple, or the more pinky tones with the orange, or pinky tones with the blues, that type of thing. There's just so many options. I love that they give a really nice solid black. You guys know I like to be able to add depth. It just gives me more versatility with the palette, and then also just the quality of them both. It was a fantastic color story to work with and a fantastic palette, and per usual when it comes to Odens Eye, just a great palette all around. So definitely had to rank very high in my countdown. This was towards the beginning of the year, but the Kailav Art Nouveau, I believe, Nouveau, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm so sorry, but this palette right here was a fantastic fun palette. It's like a rainbow palette, but it brought a little something different to it, because when it comes to the rainbow, yes, it has a color of the rainbow in here, but there's different finishes. So for your orange, you only had a shimmer to work with, that type of thing, and for the yellow, like a true yellow, you only had a matte. And so the type of rainbow looks that you could get were very interesting, different, and I just enjoyed the looks that I was able to get with this palette, kind of combining all of the colors. The shimmers are also really nice, nothing too sparkly, but just really nice solid shimmers that go on really smoothly, look really nice. And also with these shimmers, like where you put them, even with or without glitter primer, they stay in that spot pretty much all day, look really good at the end of the day, and I don't have any creasing, fading, or sparkles falling everywhere, so they're just a really solid, trustworthy type of shimmer. And like I said, the color story is really what stands out to me with this palette. Again, I have a nice solid black that I like, and you can also get a pretty neutral look if you kind of stick to the neutral sides. You can go very colorful, you can mix and match the colors. It was a lot of fun, so I created, I want to say, I did a video with at least 3 or more, maybe even 5 looks with this palette. That's how inspired I was with this palette, and I created many more off camera, and looking at it now, it would be fun to dive back into. So that's definitely, when I see that in a palette, it's like, okay, that's a top favorite palette for sure from the year. If I can look at a palette and want to go back to it to create more looks, that's a fantastic palette. Next up, I'm going to give it to the Nomad Cosmetics Snow Whistler Lodge. Nomad Cosmetics was really on a roll this year when it came to palettes, and you're going to see that in my countdown, but this was the intro to 2022. This is, I'm pretty sure, the first palette they launched. I reviewed it when I was like super nauseous and like morning sickness with my little one, so I have a lot of memories attached to this, trying to get the video for this one out. But overall, looking back at it, it was a really nice palette that I did enjoy. It's got such a fun, cool tone take on the blue and green and kind of browny tones in this palette. You know, I tend to, when I think of, you know, green and brown together, I think of very warm tone looks, but with these colors, with these tones, I got a lot of really cool tone looks, which is just perfect for winter. I feel like that just screams wintertime. And then when it came to the shimmers, they were a lot of fun as well. Not my favorite, I would say, like out of all of the shimmers that Nomad has come out with, but they're really nice shimmers. They work really well. Two of them are kind of duochrome, so depending on what you pair it with, the, you know, different colors will stand out and whatnot. And overall, it was just a really solid palette that you could go to and get a really solid look of like a dark blue on the outer corner, light blue in the crease, dark green on the outer corner, light green in the crease, that type of thing. Or you can mix and match and jump around in the palette, which you guys know I love to do, and create a lot of fun combos when it comes to the colors that you chose. And I always like to add a little bit of red with these cool tones, or it's just a lot of fun. It's a fun little addition to this palette. So yeah, it's been a long time since I've reached for this palette because it did come out at the beginning of 2022. But looking at it now, thinking back to all the looks, definitely this is a palette that I could create even more looks if I had the time. And overall, I just have great memories from it. Great formula, so many dark, deep, like just rich, deep mattes that were so nice to work with. I had to give it a top spot for sure. I was probably the last person to review this, but this is the Kaleidos Flower Punk palette. I enjoyed this palette so very much. Like, it's a little bit messy when it comes to the shimmers. The shimmers are beautiful, but they're just very messy. However, I could kind of see past it just because I love the color combination. And this is definitely a palette that no matter what type of look I did, how long it's been since I've done that look, I can see that look and go like, that came from Flower Punk, because the colors are just so distinct and the color combinations you can do are just so unique from a lot of palettes that are coming out with this grungy green with the pink or the very pastel minty green. It was so fun, so different, and so beautiful. The creaminess of their formula is very nice. I remember having a bit of issues with the darkest one, not every time, but there were a couple times where it was wanting to give me a little bit of trouble, but that was the only shade really. These shades are so beautiful, and these, while they were a bit lighter tone, the pinky tones, they were fine for what I liked it for, because I would just kind of put it on the inner corner as a pop of pink and then focus on the greens for the outer corner and whatnot. But overall, I just remember having so much fun with this palette, and the looks that I got were so fun, unique, and different. And definitely just looking at this color story, I'm like, I want to go back and create something fun with it. And again, I like that grunge with the pastels. That's such a cool combination when it comes to the type of looks that you can do. And this palette just gives it to you so very nicely. And of course, the cover, when it comes to the color story, they did so well, kind of bringing that cover to life with the color story. It's a really cool concept for a palette. Very well done, and the looks that I got still stand out in my memory from the past year as being some of my favorites. Odens Eye collabed with Angelica Nyquist this year for the Hela palette, and this palette right here, the color story is really what just grabs my heart and just propelled it to the top, because not only is it great quality when it comes to Odens Eye for the mattes and the shimmers, but the color story is so fun. Again, giving that grungy, you know, greeny vibe with this pink, this hot pink, and this more cool tone down here. I created a lot of really fun, unique, and different type of looks that I just really enjoyed. And also with the shimmers in here, there were a couple different ones. This is like a multi-chrome. There were a couple ones that were a little chunky. I would say like this one, this pink, and this dark one, but the only one I really didn't care to work with was the pink. The other greens were all really smooth and stood out. They have a lot of, you know, sparkle to them, but they're still very smooth to apply, have a lot of pigment and whatnot. And overall, for the most part, I just love the majority of this palette. And like I said, the looks that I got just stand out in my head as being so very fun. So I knew this was going to get a very high spot in my countdown just because of how amazing and how much fun I had with this palette. And she did such a great job with the color combination when it came to the color story in here. Amazing. And I felt like anytime I dipped into this palette, I didn't feel like I was being too repetitive with the type of looks that I was getting, just because there's so many pops of colors. There's so many different directions you can take this, you know, different ways to combine colors on the lid, to combine colors in your crease, that type of thing. I was never bored when I was in this palette, and that's always a good sign. So never bored with the palette. Fantastic quality formula mattes, fantastic quality formula shimmers. It had to get a high spot. Next up, I had to give these a high spot because while they're small 6-pan palettes, which I tend not to rank very high in my countdowns just because versatility is a little limiting when there's only 6 shadows, I had to give this one a high spot because of just how amazing the quality and the color story is, and that is the Colored Raine Secret Garden palette. These palettes, again, they're small. There's not a whole lot of creativity, but for it being a little 6-pan palette, you can get a lot of creativity when it comes to this color story. They did just such a good job with the color story. And when it comes to the quality of these mattes, oh my goodness, they are so good. They're so creamy, they're so pigmented, they're so blended blendable and smooth, this palette was a dream to work with. It's an all matte palette, which some might find a little boring, but I had a fantastic time with this palette. I created many looks with it. I did all matte looks, and then I would reach for shimmers out of like my all shimmer palettes to pair with it, and it was just a fantastic time. And like I said, they did a great job with the color story and not making it too repetitive, and still with enough variety to make it fun and different to use more than 1 or 2 times. Because of these color combinations with the grunge and with the bold, I had a great time mixing and matching them together. Got a lot of really good foresty looks, got a lot of really good fall tone looks. You still had a lot of intensity though when it came to the pop in your look, because these colors are not only so saturated, but this orange is so popping. It was a great time. I did a 3 looks palette or 3 looks video with this palette because I was so inspired. I felt like each look I did was a little bit different, and I did many more off camera. So like I said, it's a tiny palette, yes, but I had to give it a very high ranking just because the quality is so good, and the color story was just such a me type of color story. It's still my art. And on the heels of that, in the same breath, I had to also give it to Queen Bee, the next step, and this one's getting a little bit higher because the shimmers are just oh so special. But I tell you, colored Raine with these little 6-pan palettes, they're like $16 I think, and the quality you get is just so good. Cannot recommend them enough. The Queen Bee, again, a fun color story, and the shimmers are just so beautiful. This is like a duochrome. I don't think it's a multi-chrome. I think it's just like a iridescent duochrome. So beautiful. And then this is a very sparkly type of bronzy tone that's lovely. And then the mattes in here, there's only 4 mattes, but the type of looks that I got are just kind of like, if I wanted to create one look that just encapsulated my favorite fall look, I could get it with this palette, because you got the depth for the outer corner, you got the browns for those, you know, the brownie tones and falls, but you have the red, which I feel like is a very me type of color to go for when it comes to red, and then you have the yellow to kind of smoke everything out and just give it that little bit of grunge, a little bit of yellow to the edges of my look. The look that I did with this, again, I think I did 3 looks with this as well, and I just had such a great time with it. Formula for the mattes is pretty much just like the previous palette. Amazing, fantastic, I love them. And the formula for the shimmers is also really nice. They're very smooth, they're very easy to pick up with a brush. They both have a little bit of a sheerness, like a iridescentness to the look of them when you first apply them, but if you go back in once or twice, you can really build it up and get a very nice opaque type of look. Had to give these palettes a very high spot in my ranking. A bit of a newer palette that I tried this year, I had to give this palette, the Makeup and Cocktail Cosmetics Anna Jean palette, a very high spot in my ranking just because of how blown away I was with the mattes in this palette. The shimmers also are lovely, really didn't have any issues with the shimmers at all, but the thing that really just impressed me was the quality of the mattes, the intensity you could get with the mattes, how easy they were to blend. They were just so beautiful. I did a look with this, I think just 1 look, a first impressions type right before the baby came, and I was just blown away by how beautiful, how easy it was to blend, and how beautiful they are. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 glitters in here, but I had to rank it in my top 20 just because of how blown away I was by how nice the formula is when it comes to the mattes, and the shimmers are really nice. Not to dog on them and say that they're not good, I really do like them. They don't have a ton of sparkle to them or like metallicness to them, at least not all of them. I would say a couple of them, like this one especially, has a little bit of metallicness to them, but for the majority of them, they're just really nice solid shimmers that give you nice pigmentation and nice color, and just a gorgeous array of colors. Like I think the color story was very well done, and the type of looks that I got from this palette, which I reviewed not too long ago on my channel. If you want to see all the looks, I include it in the Palette Palooza. I'll try to link it up here if you want to watch that video after, and I share all the looks that I created with this palette, and I feel like I got a lot of versatility when it came to like very green looks, very like fall and autumny type of looks up here, but also cool tone blue and purples. I just felt like I was very versatile with this palette, got a lot of, you know, different types of looks, and I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I was just blown away by how nice the formula was, so I had to include this in my ranking for sure. Not a fan of glitters, so I always ignored the glitters when I was in there, but there's so many shades in here, it didn't really detract for me in creating looks, but just something to be aware, there are pressed glitters in here. Alright, moving right along, next comes a Nomad Fetes de Provence palette, and I think when I was ranking this at the beginning of the year and ranking this in my Palette Paloozas, I might have ranked a little bit lower or put palettes that I've already mentioned a bit higher, but this is a palette that I had to give a high ranking because it's the palette that I can't forget about. So like anytime I think back on the palettes that I tried this year, anytime I think back on Nomad palette, anytime I think back on like cool tone type of looks that I've done, this palette constantly comes to mind. So I had to kind of bump it up a little bit in my ranking because I really felt like I didn't give it a proper ranking back then, because this palette is just so nice, it's so beautiful, so lovely, and I had to rank it a little bit higher. I love the array of mattes. The quality when it comes to Nomad is amazing, as we've already talked about, and the way they paired these and did the color story is so easy and effortless, not only to create looks, but to create creative looks. Because if you want to do like the yellow with the purple, it's very easy to use this in the inner crease, use this to blend it out, and then for the outer corner, you got purple, you got this to blend it out, you got a dark shade to deepen it up. It was just so very easy and effortless, and the shimmers as well are very beautiful. This is, of course, my favorite because it was yellow, but it also was a type of duochrome shade that was stunning, and I enjoyed it so much. But the other shimmers in here as well, these two were a little bit softer, but these two were lovely, and overall, I just created so many very effortlessly beautiful and very striking and different type of looks with this color story. They were very different for me especially, and they were types of looks that anytime I did a look with them, and whenever I recorded videos afterwards, I can look back on those videos and go like, that was the Fetes de Provence palette, and I love that look. It was just so beautiful, cool toned, very different for me, but a lovely combination. It has the yellow in there to really draw me to it and really make me, you know, enjoy the type of looks because it's not too heavy on the pink and purpley aspect of it. And I don't know, I just loved it so much, and as I said, I can't get this palette out of my head. I'm always thinking about how much I enjoyed it, so I had to give this one a very high ranking. Give Me Glow came out with a teal nightlife palette, and this is going very high in my ranking just because of how fun this color story is. How fun. It needs a black in there, so anytime I use this palette in my head, I just automatically, you know, include me going and reaching for a black, because those type of looks with a black in this color story, so good. The shimmers are also really nice, a little bit chunkier than what I'm used to, but this is a multi-chrome and it's very beautiful, and the type of looks you can get with this palette are so fun. Yellow, green, and blue, the color combinations, the type of looks you can get with that are just so me when it comes to summer and my type of looks. I love this combination, and the formula also is just fantastic. I really do like Give Me Glow's matte formula. They're amazing, and then the shimmers, as I said, were really nice. A little bit chunkier than I like, but still very workable. It's just a little bit messier throughout the day, that type of thing. And yeah, I had to give this one a high ranking as well, just because of how lovely it was to work with, how beautiful it is to own. Like, I love having this and owning it. And overall, I just felt like she did a fantastic job. It was a great palette, colors that I love, so had to rank high. All right, next up is going to be the Nomad Paradise Islands palette. This palette came in just in time for spring, or like kind of as springtime was going on. And I thought it was just the perfect spring palette, and I still think that absolutely. It's just got such a lovely array of colors. It's got a little bit of depth in there with the blue and the green, not a ton of depth. That's kind of why I saw this as a very spring pastel-y type of look, but overall really pretty colors that really pop and give you that very light kind of springtimey look. You could get a little bit of depth, but for me, the easiest go-to with this palette and the easiest looks I was able to create with it were very pastelish. So if you're looking for a pastel that isn't like super pastel, but you can get those very soft type of looks, I feel like this is a great palette because it's just got so many bright springtime colors. The shimmers in here are also really pretty. This obviously was my favorite, but overall, like, they're all very nice, except for I think the only real dud was like the pinky tone for me. Overall, just a really nice array of colors, and if you, like I said, for springtime, it was perfect. I had so much fun with this palette, creating looks with it, and quality-wise, of course, as I was saying, mattes and shimmers. I'm mentioning a lot of Nomad here, so I feel like I'm getting a bit repetitive, but their quality is fantastic, and this was another launch from them from this past year that was fantastic. Ace Beaute's Paletteopoly has to come next because, well, it's a little bit maybe cheesy with the way they, like, you have to have this palette, or like you have to buy a game with this palette. However, if you're just looking at this for the color story, this is a fantastic color story, and I just love it, absolutely. The game is also fun. If you do get this palette and it has a game, I say play it, definitely, or if you're like in a rut when it comes to like what to do, it's a lot of fun to just do a palette bingo and just randomly pick a card and then have to create, you know, have to use that in an eye look. It's a lot of fun because not only is it a fantastic quality because the mattes in here are just so saturated, so beautiful, and the shimmers are beautiful, like stunning, very nice, but the color story is fun. You got this bright pink, you got the grunge with the green and yellow, you have these really dark kind of matte neutral tones, you got purples in there, you got this more like, I don't even know what this shade is, magenta type of color, and then blues. It's just a fun mix of colors that, especially if you're kind of jumping around, you're gonna get some creative looks. And I did play this game, and boy was that look very creative. I have it on my channel, and I played it some more, and I wanted to do like multiple looks with this palette and play the game and then just do regular ones, and I never got around to being able to share that, but maybe I'll put it on my Instagram eventually because they were a lot of fun looks. But as a palette just standing on its own 2 feet, I just love this color story, and the type of looks that I got were just, it stood out in my memory as being so fun. And like I said, the quality of these, there's so much intensity. This palette will stain like no other because there's purples and pinks in here that are just so saturated. They stain, but honestly that didn't bother me at all. I just love the type of looks. I like that I could get very neutral, I could get very bright and like colorful. I just thoroughly enjoyed this palette. palette, and while the packaging isn't really me type of packaging, it's just not the type of style that I like for display pieces and whatnot, it's definitely a palette that the inside I absolutely love. Alright, and the last Nomad palette that I'm going to mention in this video, I told you I had a lot of Nomad to mention, but this is the, I don't even know how to pronounce this, but it's the Monteverde Cloud Forest palette. This palette came out just before my baby arrived, and I think I did 10 looks with this right before she arrived, and I had so much fun. Like 10 looks, you would think you would kind of run out of ideas, but this is a palette I did 10 looks, and looking at it, like I could create some different ones just because it's so easy with this very bold rainbow palette with all these gorgeous kind of greeny tone shimmers. I had so much fun with this palette. I just felt like the possibilities when it comes to this palette are endless. The color choices that they put for this rainbow palette, very bold when it comes to the orange, the yellow, the pink. They give you those colors, the purple, very intensely saturated. Again, Nomad Cosmetics formula is just top notch when it comes to their mattes. And their shimmers are also really nice. They're very heavy on the greens in this palette, but I didn't mind that. I absolutely loved it. And then this shade up here is like a duochrome that is stunning as well. And overall, I just found them very easy to pick up. A lot of them have a lot of sparkle intensity to them, and it's just a palette that I absolutely loved. Again, I'm gonna get very long-winded when it comes to Nomad because I feel like I'm saying the same thing again, but if you want a good rainbow palette and you really like green, I feel like this is a fantastic rainbow palette to get because you get the rainbow, but you also get all these beautiful green shimmers to play around with it. Not all of them are green, like this is like a purpley gray. It's very, very pretty, and some of them might lean a little bit blue depending on what you pair it with. Like this has almost a blue duochrome shift to it, so not all green, but it's a little heavy on the green. But like I said, I love that about it. That kind of endeared it to me a little bit more, and since the rainbow palette with green shimmers, I had to give it a very high spot in this ranking. I'm sure you guys were expecting to see this palette, but Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette is next, and this palette, this is so much fun. I didn't rank it like a top 5, mainly because this top row was a little disappointing in how kind of light and dusty it was and how close some of the colors were, and then the shimmers didn't blow me away. However, these 2 rows, oh my goodness, the saturation, the intensity, the gorgeousness that you could create with them, I had a great time. And I love that while it's a rainbow palette, it's a very grungy type of rainbow palette that I had a fantastic time with, and definitely is a type of rainbow look that I really did enjoy. I did feel like I had to be a little careful not to get too carried away with the grunge because it got a little dark for me, but that's really just something I have to keep in mind for me personally. If I went too crazy, I felt like a little bit of raccoony eyes, but that aside, I just had a great time with this rainbow palette. I like that it was, you know, had so many mattes, but then gave you shimmers. Yeah, the shimmers weren't my absolute favorite formula, but they were nice. They were nice enough to work with. They gave a lot of shine and a lot of intensity, and I feel like for the most part, they were pretty easy to pick up on a brush with, except for the yellow. And I remember Potent was they were so potent. It was so beautiful. Morph as well, Feral, they were just so intense. So like I said, the formula maybe wasn't the best. I think I remember longevity and then just a little bit of, you know, messiness and when it came to the sparkle throughout the day and stuff like that. But overall, when they were easy to pick up, they were very beautiful on the eyes, and a lot of them had a lot of great intensity. I think Regal was just a very disappointing one for me, but overall, really nice palette. Had to give it a very high spot in my ranking, and looking back at it, I had a great time and I really did enjoy this palette. Alright, and the last palette we're going to talk about in today's video, so palette number 6 out of all the palettes I tried in 2022 goes to the Odens Eye Christmas Eve palette. This is a limited edition launch that they did a month or so ago, and this color story was so fun and different. I had a fantastic time. Cool tone grunge is how I would describe the type of looks that I was getting with this palette, and I loved that. I was here for that. I thought it was so fun, fantastic, and different. The shimmers in here weren't my absolute favorite because I would say maybe half of them were more of that chunkier type of formula that, no joke, is like stunning on the eyes. Like I did a couple looks and it just looks like there's liquid metallic loveliness on your eyes. It's so beautiful, especially on camera and in person. Like it's just so much shine, but in practicality, when you're like creating looks with it and using it or just wearing it throughout the day, there's a lot of fallout that happens. That's just a wee bit annoying, but still very pretty if you don't mind the texture and the flakiness. But I mean, even with majority of them being like that, there were still shades like Gorgeous is a multi-chrome that's absolutely stunning, but also Feeling Time were my favorite, that when I was creating looks that were just so easy, effortless, and beautiful to do. And then the mattes, of course, fantastic formula. We're talking about Odens Eye here, and the quality in here is just what I expect and I've found from them in the past. Such solid formula, such a fun array of mattes as well. You got cool tone blues, you got a gray, you got this cool tone green, you got the yellow and the grungy kind of brown up here. This yellow is more of a satiny texture, which I don't love. I really wish they would have just stuck a solid, simple matte in there, because the texture of this just confuses me a little bit, because I would treat it as a matte and it wouldn't really perform like a matte. Like you couldn't really tell on camera, but in person it didn't look as good as if it was just going to be a matte. It looked a little bit see-through, a little bit streaky almost. And that's getting very nitpicky, so it's not like streaky where you can see it, but me using it in a look, I could tell it was kind of just sticking a little bit weird. But then I used it kind of packing it all over my lid, and it didn't really act like a shimmer either. That's why I'm kind of calling it a satin. So that's the only thing that confused me when it came to this palette. It's like, why don't you just put a matte in there? But that is, again, we're nitpicking the palette at this point. As a whole, I really enjoyed the color story, and I really enjoyed the type of looks that I got out of this, and the formula of the mattes is just so, so good. So had to give it a very high spot in my ranking just because it was such a fantastic palette. And I know this is limited edition and it's already no longer available, but if you got your hands on it, I think you will enjoy it, and you'll have to let me know, did you get it and do you enjoy it? Alright, so that is where I'm going to be stopping today. This is number 6 palette is where we're ending it, and tomorrow, or hopefully tomorrow, but the next video you see from me is going to be my number 5 palette. Not only am I going to reveal in that video, but we'll also get to create one more look together on camera with the palette before the year is out, and I always look forward to those videos. So I hope you do too, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow or whenever that video goes up and see what palette was the 5th best palette out of all the palettes I tried in 2022. I hope you'll come back and check it out, and let me know if you can guess. What palette do you think ranked number 5? Leave it down below in the comments. I always love to see if you guys can predict that, and I feel like you're pretty good at predicting that. But yeah, that is gonna do it for me. Those are my top favorite palettes from 2022, at least until the 6th palette, and then you'll have to continue. The saga continues in a couple more videos, but I hope you guys enjoyed it as always. And if you did, hit the like button. That always helps me out on my channel. And don't forget to check me out over on Instagram. I'm LadyKD92 over there, where I post reels, up close eye pictures, all that sort of thing. And yeah, with that said, I'll see you guys very soon in my next video, hopefully tomorrow.